Welcome to Records Management. I'm Felicia Kennedy, the Management Analyst for the Maine State Archives, and I'll be conducting this webinar. This training is for records officers and assistants who haven't had any training before, or for those who would like a refresher course. What we're offering in this session, coupled with what Rob Karen will cover in Part 2, is what we like to consider our minimum standards training. These are the topics we'll be covering in Part 1. An introduction to records management, including terms and responsibilities, and the benefits of having a proper program in place. How to gain control of records, including appointing records officers, conducting an inventory and retentions and schedules. Also a brief overview of email records management. And then questions. If you have questions, you could send to us. Our exciting world of records management. It's very difficult to make records management an exciting topic. Having a head flop on top of a desk is a common reaction when you tell people you're going to be talking about records. It's by no means a dynamic topic, but it's an important, often overlooked element of every employee's job. Consider that this is something that's taking place on a consistent basis, yet many state employees aren't even aware of it. Agencies aren't planning or putting procedures in place for it, yet records are being created and destroyed in all state government agencies on a daily basis. The question is, are those records being properly managed? The records management program exists because it's written in Maine statute. According to Title V, Chapter 6, every state agency must establish and maintain an active, continuing records management program. The statute is based on an ISO standard for records management. That's an international standard for organizations, which states the following. The standardization of records management policies and procedures ensures that appropriate attention and protection is given to all records, and that the evidence and information they contain can be retrieved more efficiently and effectively using standard practices and procedures. So what is records management? It is controlling records throughout their life cycle. This begins with the creation or receipt of a record and continues through maintenance, use, and disposition. Records management is the process by which an agency captures and maintains evidence of and information about its programs, transactions, policies, and procedures in the form of records. However, the problem is records management is very seldom an exact science. Part of records management, including knowing what to retain and what to dispose of at the proper time, is using common sense and sound judgment. Determining what is and isn't a record and deciding retention periods is not always black and white. Believe me, I wish it were, because my job would be made so much easier. There can be several variables or gray areas, so it's important to ask questions and find answers so records aren't kept needlessly, or worse, that records aren't improperly disposed of. Some records management misconceptions. Records management is all about getting records out of the office. Obviously, this is not the case. We're certainly sympathetic to space needs because we have them also, but we are trying to make agencies understand that if records are managed properly, then perhaps they won't have the same kind of space problems they have now. Sometimes you have to address the process and see what can be changed instead of doing the same old, same old. Meanwhile, boxes pile up in your office and also at the Record Center. Most state employees don't need to concern themselves with records management because they are not creating anything important. All state employees are creating public records. Unfortunately, there are still many employees who don't realize this, and many agencies which either have outdated schedules or no schedules at all. If you don't know what to keep, it's better to keep everything just in case. Any employee should be checking with their records officer, director, or check with the schedules, policies or statutes, or the state archives to find out what records they should be keeping. If an agency has had a FOA, you know hanging on to records longer than you should can have its own legal risks, not to mention sifting through records unnecessarily. All emails should be saved or archived. I'm concerned that this is being presented by OIT, and I'll be addressing this later on. If your agency doesn't send anything to the Record Center, they don't need schedules. All records, which are deemed as records, need to be on a schedule. The Record Center and archives are the same thing. They are not. The Record Center is for retention materials, and the archives is for archival records. Rob will be talking more about this in his part of the program. What records management does? We provide standards, procedures, and techniques for effective management of records. This is done through our chapter rules, the general schedules, and other information we have available on our website. We help establish retention schedules. Agencies write their own schedules, but we will review and give guidance and approve the submitted schedules. We provide training for records officers and others in state government. We provide assistance in the transfer and retrieval of records. That's to and from the State Record Center, and also the transfer of records to the archives. The state agency responsibility is to appoint an agency records officer. Records officers should have a thorough knowledge of the organization and its functions. And obviously, depending on how big your department is, there may be more than one. Per Title V, agencies should have an established records management program and policies in place. Agencies need to inventory their records and have updated schedules. Depending on how big the agency is, they might need to appoint assistant records officers and make sure all employees are informed and trained. Major reasons why good records management is vital. It supports better management decision making. Managers who have access to relevant data make better, more informed decisions. It improves efficiency and productivity. A good records management program can help reduce the volume of records stored and improve retrieval systems, so the right record gets to the right person as quickly as possible. It can free up office space by removing inactive or obsolete records. It promotes a positive reputation for state agencies. Records management promotes a positive image by complying with FOA requests in an efficient manner by being able to produce requested records. Also, by having up-to-date schedules and following those retentions. It protects the agency and the records. It helps to meet statutory and regulatory requirements, including archival, audit, and oversight activities, and also helps to document the historical records of the agency, and safeguards vital information. Every organization, whether public or private, needs a comprehensive program for protecting its vital records from information from disaster, whether that's environmental or technological. Implications of improper record keeping. Maine state agencies produce records every day. They are vital components to the functionality of the agency for administrative, fiscal, legal, and historical purposes. Improperly destroying records is not the answer to records management, but neither is keeping everything. There are implications for both. If your agency doesn't have a records management program, you could be in danger of some of the following: a presumption that records are correct and complete, a waste of resources or money to store unnecessary records, an inability to locate information when needed, a destruction of records before they have met fiscal or legal requirements, or possible destruction of archival records, and having to produce records in discovery or a FOA request that otherwise should have been destroyed. Some key aspects of records management: ensuring compliance with all relevant record-keeping laws and regulations. Agencies should be aware of any federal laws, state statutes, or policies regarding their records. Organizing active records for retrieval when needed. This would be within the agency and would include paper or electronic records. Determining how long to keep recorded information, known as retention and disposition. Managing inactive records, those records that are typically transferred or destroyed once closed. And then again, protecting vital records, those records which are absolutely essential to continue and or reconstruct the operation of a state agency. Gaining control of your records, what we've called the 10-step plan. Step 1, appointing records officers and assistants. You need the right people in the right places. A records officer coordinates the department's records management program and ensures records management activities are performed in accordance with standards and procedures. Records officers should collaborate with others within the agency at all levels to understand their business needs and functions and what records are necessary to conduct business activities. You don't need to be an expert on everything, but you must know enough to be able to ask the right questions and provide proper records guidance. It's important to communicate across your agency that records management is an integral part of state government operations. Step 2, conduct a records inventory. An inventory is perhaps the most important, often overlooked step in the records management process. But if you don't know what you have, how can you properly schedule your records and determine what should stay and what should go? What is an inventory? It's a high-level survey of all types of information created, received, and stored by your agency. It can tell you what record series you have. Those are the common collections of record types, the different formats of records, whether they're paper or digital, or perhaps you have microfilm or some other format. the location of the records, the date range, and the volume of materials you have. So basically, the inventory tells you what records the organization has, how many there are, and where they can be located. And it's your role as a records officer to make sure your agency is maintaining adequate records. An often overlooked benefit of a well-implemented records management program is that identified weaknesses in records can reflect weaknesses in processes and procedures. And one way to identify these weaknesses is by conducting an office inventory. For further information, on our website we have some National Archives videos, and one of those is on the inventory. What is a record? A record means all documentary material in any format, whether that's paper, digital, including email, made or received and maintained by an agency in accordance with law or rule or in the transaction of its official business. Some things to keep in mind. Records can have varying purposes per agency. Focus on the material's content, not the format. Most non-retention or non-record materials don't document government business, or they're duplicate documents which can be destroyed. If you answer yes to any of these questions, you may have a record. Was it created in the course of business? Things like correspondence, agreements, or studies. Was it received for action, such as FOA requests or other types of information requests? Does it document agency activities and actions? Things like meeting minutes or project reports. Is it mandated by statute or regulation? Records specific to the functions of the agency or outcome-based records. Does it support financial obligations or legal claims? Items such as grants, contracts, or case files. Does it communicate agency requirements, such as guidance documents or policies and procedures? Are drafts considered records? Drafts or working documents are records, but they might only need to be retained for a brief period of time if they do not have significant administrative, legal, fiscal, or historical value. And for more information on drafts, you can go to our website and look at the July 2016 advice bulletin. We send out advice bulletins every month, and to all state employees. I hope you've been reading those. If you haven't, please do not ignore those. They are information that we are sending out to all employees regarding records management. So I hope you will take those into consideration and read those. If you answer yes to any of these questions, you may have non-retention or non-record material. Is it reference material, such as vendor catalogs or technical journals? Is it a convenience copy? These are duplicate copies of correspondence or directives that are specifically for convenience purposes where no action is required. Is it a stock copy? Things like agency publications or forms? Is it only related to your personal affairs? Those personal messages like can we do lunch? Or personal schedules. And one note, be careful about personal planners or calendars because they can be considered records if they document agency activities. And again, there's a National Archives video on non-records on our website. Step 3, create an agency records management policy. A policy will guarantee all employees are following the same records management procedures, including where records will be kept, whether in a centralized area or decentralized at individual workstations, the what type of documents to be included in the record files, the how draft documents, working papers, and copies will be handled, how records will be maintained for access, so all employees who need access can find and retrieve what they need, including confidential records, and the who will be responsible for maintaining the record copy, or who is considered as the record's custodian. Step 4, the record retention schedules. Managing your records. In order to have the information you need when it's required, there has to be a way to identify, manage, and retain records for the right amount of time. Records are managed by creating agency schedules, a document that tells you how long to keep specific types of records and what should happen to them when they have served the needs of the agency. Basically, we live our lives by schedules and agendas, giving us a certain structure to know where we need to be and what we need to do on a day-to-day basis. And this is how we need to think of our records, that without a proper schedule, people can't be expected to know what the purpose of the records are, who's responsible for keeping them, where they can be found, and for how long they need to be retained. What is a record schedule? A record schedule describes agency records, establishes a period for their retention by the agency, and provides mandatory instructions for what to do with them when they're no longer needed for current government business. This includes digital records or records that never leave the creating agency's custody. In other words, all records, anything that has been determined as a record, needs to be on a schedule. Always remember that content, not format, determines retention. What is the life cycle of a record? It begins with creation. That's receiving or generating information for the first time. Then it's active or current. That's using or referring to records regularly in the course of business, and retention is in the agency until records are closed. And then inactive or non-current, that's infrequent need for the records, but they still need to be kept for fiscal, administrative, legal, or historical purposes per approved retention schedules. And these are closed records. Retention can be served at the record center or within the agency. Disposition, that is the final fate of the record. Will these records be destroyed, or are they archival, what some people refer to as a permanent retention? The types of records schedules are either general or agency. So the general record schedules, those are issued by the Maine State Archives to provide retention and disposition standards for records common to most state agencies. And right now we have 17 of those. And then the agency schedules, those are for records unique to the office. And before submitting a new schedule, you should be sure that a general schedule doesn't exist. Do your records fall under the state general schedules? This is the list that we currently have for the general schedules. Most of the general schedules relate to audit, fiscal, correspondence, or other administrative office procedures. If you're retaining records in your office that fall under the general schedules, an agency schedule is not necessary. However, if you will be sending records to the Records Center or archives, such as Commissioner's correspondence, you will need an agency schedule so that you can provide unique schedule and series identifiers. Also, federal laws or other mandates can supersede the state general schedules, and agencies may need to keep records longer than the general schedule recommended times, so then an agency schedule would be necessary. The next step: by conducting an inventory of records, you have determined what records you have, where they are located, the dates records close, what similar series of records there are, and where the record copy resides. With the records retention schedule, you have now have to determine what purpose the records serve to the daily operations of the agency and beyond. Determining retention and disposition of your records. Unfortunately, there is no universal guide to determine retention periods and disposition methods. Each record series needs to be examined individually in regard to usage patterns, departmental needs, historic value, and legal issues. Agency retentions can vary greatly depending on a number of factors. Even records that may appear similar between two departments can have different usage patterns and require different retention strategies. In order to dispose of records at the appropriate time, you need to evaluate them in relation to the period of usefulness or specific requirements for your department. Some questions you might want to ask is, how long will the records be needed for business purposes as far as your agency is concerned? What are the fiscal or legal requirements? And what's the frequency of use? What is the record's value to your specific agency? The total retention time will be the time kept in your agency plus any time at the Record Center. So determining retention periods, what we have called the 4-part criteria. There's administrative use. What is the value of the records in carrying out the function of the organization? How long are the records needed for immediate retrieval? These are records for day-to-day business operations, materials such as correspondence, memos and reports, and typical need for these records is under 5 years, and we would recommend that those records are retained within the agency. Legal requirements is a certain period specified for compliance within statutes, agency rules, or protection of legal rights and interests of the state. Are any federal retention periods involved? These are records mandated by law or regulation, which may be needed as evidence in legal cases or leases, titles, contracts, etc. Typically, there will be specific language stating how long records are required to be retained for legal purposes. And if so, the law or statute should be cited on the schedule. This isn't always the case, as I've looked through many statutes, and sometimes it is difficult to find anything in Maine statutes related to retention times. Fiscal requirements. How much time must be allowed for the completion of fiscal activities, such as audit or budget? These records document an agency's fiscal responsibilities, such as invoices, receipts, and purchase orders. Typically, audit records are kept for 6 to 7 years. Some federal requirements may be 10 years. Historical or research purposes. Do these records document historical events or the history and development of the organization? These are records documenting the history of the agency, such as board minutes, agency policy impacting external operations, or commissioners' correspondence. Typically, these would be unique records not found elsewhere, and records valuable for public research purposes for hundreds of years to come. A record disposition is either non-archival or non-permanent, and the retention is based completely on the record's time value to the business agency functions of the agency, including audit or other statutory requirements and reasonable access by interested parties. These records will be destroyed once they have met their retention. And then there is archival. The retention is based on the record's value after it no longer serves your agency's business. Again, think in terms of the record's value in the future. Hundreds of years from now, will someone find these records useful? Will they provide any significant information that far in the future? Keep in mind, when you're thinking of archiving confidential records, these records will be sitting in a box on a shelf collecting dust, and virtually nobody will be able to look at them if they are restricted. Some things to consider. Avoid the just in case or CYA syndrome whenever possible. Information should be retained if there is a reasonable probability it will be needed at some future time to support legal or business objectives, and the consequences of its absence would be substantial. In other words, what is the risk of not having these records? Is there any statute of limitations associated with these records which would merit their retention? You need to make sure there is proper justification to support hanging on to the records. Remember, the presence or absence of information can be either harmful or helpful. So the best way to minimize the risks is to provide for systematic disposal as soon as records have met their administrative, fiscal, or legal requirements, and also to know what those are. Our retention period is most likely to be valid if it is based on the consensus of the opinions of persons most knowledgeable about the value of the information. So make sure you're getting the right information from the right people who can also support their opinions with fact. Even if you get an AAG opinion, they should be able to cite statutes or rules to back up their findings beyond a because I said so kind of reasoning. The agency schedule process. The records officer, which hopefully is most of you out there, submits an application for records retention schedule and inventory form, which are available on our website, or you can email me and I would send them, with proper justifications for the chosen retention times, and samples of the records would also need to be submitted. This is the application, schedule application form. The application provides general information about each series to be scheduled. More than one series can be included on the schedule. The schedule is really just a batch form or batch number where you're listing related record series. Think of it as related files within a folder on your computer. That's how the schedule and series function, and the highlighted sections should be completed. So you're completing this entire top section with your agency information. You would list that it's a new schedule, and you list your series title here, which could be more than one. what type of media it is, what your suggested time in the agency is, also if there's any suggested time at the record center, and whether the records will be destroyed at the end of that time or whether you think they would be archival. This is the inventory form. This form provides detailed information about each record series, including a description, the frequency of use, and when the records are considered closed, any statutes related to the records, or what justifications you use to determine your retention and disposition, which is very important. The highlighted sections should be completed, and records management would then review the schedule forms for any initial questions before meeting with the state archivist. And then once everything is reviewed and agreed upon and by our office, signed copies of the schedule are sent to the records officer, and it would be considered enacted and current. So again, the highlighted sections, the contact information here, complete description here, and the frequency of use. How long do you store the records? This should match whatever you put on the front on the schedule form. Any statutes or laws. This is where you would give us a good description or definition of how you arrived at your justification for this part, your retention, and whether these records are archival, whether the records are confidential, if they can be found elsewhere, the media types, etc. How to complete the amendment. After a retention schedule has been approved by the Maine State Archives, your agency may need to change it. You might need to do this because of a statute or policy change, because business needs have changed, or simply because current experience with the records tells you they're being accessed more or less frequently than expected. It could be the program has ended and these records are no longer being created, and the series or possibly the schedule in series will be made obsolete. Perhaps your agency is changing from paper to digital records, and there will be a change in media and the way the records are retained. So paper records would no longer be coming to the record center, and that is when you would submit the application for records retention schedule form and mark the application amendment. Steps 5 through 8, creating and implementing an office file plan. A file plan is like a smaller, specific version of agency record schedules that includes information on how and where the records are kept in a particular office or section, providing a location for every record and an electronic or paper filing system. Understanding the file plan helps employees know where to file the records and helps others know where to find the records they need to complete their tasks. Most people are unfamiliar with a file plan in relation to records management. A file plan doesn't have to be anything complicated. You're simply laying out an office roadmap for your records. It will give you the who, what, where, and when of the records. So it includes a location where paper or electronic files are physically maintained, the custodian, the person responsible for maintaining the records, the content, the description of the documents that should be filed in order to ensure a complete and accurate record of the activity, the arrangement, how the documents are organized, and the schedule information, schedule and series number, the retention and disposition. So once you've completed all the other steps and you know what records you have and you have current schedules, you can organize your records and get rid of materials which are not needed. If authorized by your record schedule, you can transfer records which are no longer needed in the office to the State Record Center, if they have a Record Center retention time, of course, and you can destroy materials which have passed their approved retention period, and this includes paper and electronic records. Once everything is organized, it's important to keep it current and up to date. So you should be sure to inventory records as part of the regular office procedure. We recommend every 2 years. It's important to update schedules as changes occur. Again, we recommend you review your schedules every 2 years. Protect records containing confidential information. Establish a system to track the location of your records so you always know where they are and in what format they're being retained in. Clean out inactive materials on a regular basis per your written procedures or by your schedules. Also clean out superseded or obsolete reference materials. Review new laws, policies, and regulations which could affect your records retention requirements. Keep employees informed and trained. Step 10. You need to be sure all staff members know about their record-keeping responsibilities. Records officers need to inform senior management on the importance of the records management program and train office staff. Monitor and enforce the program to ensure employees are doing their part. Appropriately classifying, managing, and destroying records. Have oversight procedures in place for employee compliance. In other words, have an agency records management policy and up-to-date schedules in place. Records management staff can help. We offer information on our website, or we can conduct training for records officers, directors, or personnel, dependent upon the needs of the agency. You can also refer staff to our website. So let's talk a little bit about email management. First things first, when you ask, how long do I keep my email? Remember, email is a format, not a record. Retention is determined by the content of the email. Would you look at a folder full of legal correspondence and a folder full of general information requests, group them all together and say, how long do I keep my paper? Records are unique, and email is subject to the same retention requirements as paper correspondence. The email schedules. Email is typically considered general correspondence. In the general record schedules, most general correspondence, and therefore most email, has a retention period of 2 to 5 years. Could be less. State General Schedule 13 establishes retention periods for correspondence regardless of media. These record series are all considered to be incoming or outgoing correspondence in any media format. Retention for individual employees would depend on several factors, including whether or not this is the record copy and whether or not action is required. Series 1 is Commissioner or Executive Correspondence, which does not affect very many people in state government. The retention is 2 years and an archival. And it's each department has the option of retaining Commissioner's correspondence on site for longer than 2 years. And of course, most correspondence is now in digital format And we are trying to move forward in being able to accept digital records, and we're hoping that we will be able to accept those very soon. Series 2, program correspondence retention is variable. These would be filed or retained based on the related record series. And depending on that series, we have disposition destroy, but obviously if the series is archival, that would be kept as archival material. Series 3 general correspondence consists of routine correspondence of a general nature, and you can read the full description under the General Schedule 13. That's kept for 2 years and destroyed. Series 4 transitory is purely informational in nature, only documenting information of temporary short-term value, and normally would not need to be kept more than 30 days. And that for the retention, we have retained until no longer needed, and again should not be kept more than 30 days and then destroyed. And the complete description is under the general schedules. Non-business related correspondence, typically we don't list non-records in our schedules, but because there's so much email and so much correspondence in this day and age, we thought it was important to distinguish what would be considered non-records. Non-business related correspondence is correspondence in any media format that is not relative to the conduct of agency business. And again, that there is a broader description in the general schedules, and those should be deleted or destroyed immediately. When are your emails records? If you're conducting government business in that email, it is considered a record. Communication sent or received in the transaction of local government business, of state government business. I don't know why I have local in there. Keep in mind, if you are sending work emails using your personal email account, your account could become subject to public information requests and legal discovery. What emails do you need to keep? Your first step is to determine if these are non-records, those files which do not require a retention time and can be deleted immediately. Things like personal correspondence, any email not received or created in the course of state business may be deleted immediately, since it is not an official record. The let's do lunch or can I catch a ride home type of note. Publications, promotional material from vendors and similar materials that are publicly available to anyone are not official records unless specifically incorporated into other official records. Spam, though that should obviously be deleted immediately. CCs, if this is strictly a convenience copy where you are not adding to the document or no action is required, most often these will be non-records which can be promptly deleted. The second step is to determine if the content of the email is directly related to your job or responsibilities as a state government employee. If no, and you've taken no action or aren't required to take any action, you can delete this email. Should it go to somebody else? If yes, you can either delete, if it's a CC requiring no action, or forward and delete. These are not considered records you have to retain because you are not the party responsible for the records. The third step, to determine if you are actually the custodian of the official record copy. If you've determined that the email is a record and part of your job, the final step would be to determine if you hold the record copy. If you are the designated person in your agency responsible for are you the designated person in your agency responsible for retaining these records? If no, and no action has been taken, you can either delete or forward to the person you know as the appropriate record custodian? If yes, this email is the official record copy and you must retain it according to the record's retention schedule. This is where appropriate agency records schedules and file plans are vital, because employees would know what records they're responsible for keeping. Also keep in mind that email records are typically general correspondence and will most often have a retention of 2 years or less, unless they are related to specific programs, case files, etc. So this might seem like a lengthy process, but typically we're talking about records you can quickly analyze and destroy, because much of state government email is transitory. Develop an email plan of attack. Once you open an email message, decide what you're going to do with it before you close it. You can delete it. Is this a non-record or non-retention material? Can this information be found elsewhere which doesn't document proof of an action? If so, delete it. Consider whether you will refer to the information again. Are you required to keep it? Many emails can be deleted because the information is transitory. This also goes for sent emails. You can deal with it. Try to address each email message only once before taking action. If you can respond or take specific action in 2 minutes or less, do it. Respond and file and be done with it. Much of your email can probably be taken care of this way. Forward it. Email messages requesting information or an action are not always directed to the appropriate person. After reading a message, determine whether you need to respond to it or whether it should go to someone else. You can flag it. If a response or specific action will take more than 2 minutes of your time, you may choose to defer it. Flag messages that you are going to work on later and have a specified email time to work on these types of files. Email planning, organizing your folders. It's best to set up folders in your Outlook mailbox that organize email messages according to your retention schedules, with subfolders set up by year and month. This will make it easy to delete messages that have fulfilled their retention periods without having to look at individual messages again. For more information on mailbox and archive folders, you can watch OIT's 8-minute video on the intranet site. That's located on the intranet site. One word of warning, an important email note here. Be careful when seeing the word archive or archiving on the OIT site. This does not mean all email should be saved as a permanent record. Remember, email is only a format. It is the content of the email that matters, and each record should be retained according to schedule. I'm concerned that employees are being told to archive or save all of their email records. This is not true and should not be done. The PST folders are meant as a means to store records which need to be retained for a specified period or for those records which are actually archival. But by no means should an employee be indiscriminately sending all of their email to a PST folder and just leaving it there forever without any kind of management at all. Some suggested mailboxes: personal email or non-record material you can delete immediately. Transitory email, delete when no longer needed. Again, that would typically be 30 days or shorter. General correspondence requests, delete after 2 years. Program-related emails, file and retain according to schedule. Those specified either in the general schedules or in your agency-specific schedules. Permanent email, should be saved to archival folders, things such as commissioners' correspondence or items related to major policy decisions. Some email tips. Don't use personal email for professional business. Your personal email account could become subject to FOA. Don't delete or save emails indiscriminately. Remember, email is a format. It's the content of the email that must be evaluated and then retained accordingly. Limit the use of reply all or sending those thank you and you're welcome emails. Consider this. If this was in paper format and not email, would you be sending all the responses, replies, forwards, CCs, etc. that you send? Because the email is so easy and convenient, we tend to overuse and misuse its intended purpose in state government. Fill in and use meaningful subject lines. This will help you sort, organize, index, and search for your emails. Plan daily times. Try to use 10 or 15 minutes first thing in the morning or at the end of the day to devote to your email management. Consider an agency-wide records time. Try to get upper management's involvement to plan for a department-wide electronic records time where all employees devote 1 day per month, once every 2 or 3 months, or whatever time is allowable, to records management with a focus just on email. Separate transitory email. Obviously, these should be deleted as soon as possible, but when transitory email is kept for reference purposes, it should be separated and labeled as such into folders, so it's clear these are for reference purposes only and can be purged when no longer needed. You can CC yourself to help manage your sent mail. You can CC yourself on messages which have to be retained and manage them with your other incoming mail. Your sent mail folder will then contain only duplicates and messages of transitory value and can be purged regularly. Just make sure all pertinent metadata is contained there, so you have that. Some tools in Outlook. You can color code email and organize them by categories. This makes it easier to send them to appropriate folders. Another tool is to set up rules to help manage your inbox and send emails to specified folders. I do this for things like listserv messages. I have them automatically go to a folder in my non-records portion of my inbox, so I know these are informational and I should look at these and delete as soon as possible. But they're not cluttering up my inbox. They're all in one folder. An overall electronic records management. Some file naming challenges. Uniqueness. Since files can be moved to other directories and subdirectories, they should be given names that will still be unique after this happens. Persistence over time. Each file name should outlast the person who created it and named that file. In other words, it should still make sense after you or your current staff members have moved on. So be careful about naming things, Bob's files or stuff like that. Access and ease of use. A simple, straightforward file naming policy is more likely to be followed, and people are more likely to be able to retrieve the records easily. Ease of administration. The policy should work with what already exists. In other words, consider how files will need to be migrated and how software will be funded if your agency chooses to use some other type of document management program not supported by state IT. When records are kept in more than one format, you should identify an official record copy. to which you will apply the full retention period. When the record copy is electronic, it's important to identify the storage location, including the directory and subdirectory, so that all changes are made there. Your schedules should also reflect what the record copy is. So if your schedules all say paper and all your records are now kept in digital format, you might want to think about doing some updates. An important reminder: organizing and managing records, including electronic records, limits your liability for deleting records you shouldn't and gives you authority to delete files you should delete. It will also reduce legal exposure in discovery proceedings on records that otherwise should have been destroyed. In other words, if it exists and someone asks to see it, the agency has to produce it. While you aren't under any legal obligation to destroy records as they become eligible, as long as they exist, you're obligated to reference them. If your agency isn't following its retention schedules, this can be viewed by outside sources as an inadequate management program, or even worse, as intentional wrongdoing. Consider the ramifications to your agency if a party is aggrieved because information which was supposed to be destroyed per agreed to retention schedules was negligently retained. Would this person or business have grounds to sue your agency? At the very least, it could cause a lot of unneeded negative publicity. It's something to think about if you know of someone in your office hoarding paper or electronic records. A final note: when an employee leaves a position, computer files, including email, may not be automatically deleted. And senior administrators should take action to ensure that the electronic records of their employees are maintained as required, especially if an employee leaves a position. You can use the OIT checklist for departing employees. It's very informative. Or you can go to the OIT website for more information. A final note: how do you find the time? Well, the first step is to start. As with any project, you have to start somewhere, and putting it off isn't going to solve anything. In state government, we all tend to be overworked, or we're asked to do things out of our job descriptions. That seems to come with the territory. If first steps are never taken, things will always remain as they are now. And if there are storage problems, management and retrieval issues now, those issues are only going to be compounded with time if they are not addressed. How do you begin? You get management on board. This isn't always an easy task, but management does need to understand that records management is written in statute, and it is part of their responsibility under the law. They need to be on board and create policy for their agency. You need to conduct an inventory. You need to know what records your agency is creating and what's being stored. Again, get management support. Really need to update those schedules. Of course, the last piece is to review and update the schedules. We have some schedules that haven't been updated for 30 or 40 years. And in my opinion, that's just as negligent as having no schedules for your agency at all. How does records management become a priority? My question is, how can it not be? We really have to accept that records and records management has come to the forefront in this day of freedom of access and electronic media. As much as we'd like to ignore it and just keep doing things the same old way, you're just adding to the current problems by doing nothing. We had those same issues here where for years things were done that way because they were always done that way, until we had a lot of turnover here and new people wanted to see change and improve procedures. And it can be a painful, slow process, but it has to be initiated. And I'm really amazed how far we've come in 5 years. I know it can be difficult to get people on board, to change the way they've always been doing things. Everyone's busy, and when I do records training, the last thing people want to make a priority is records management. It may seem easier to just keep doing things the same way and get it done and over with, but it really isn't solving the bigger problem or looking at the bigger picture for your agency. So what are the issues in your agency? Probably the average employee would say email is the biggest challenge. Is your agency doing anything to help? Could you have a policy in place so employees are spending a specific set time devoted to managing email, or have agency-wide electronic days so everyone is working towards the same goals at the same time? That's something to think about. I will leave you with these records management quotes. Records management is like an elevator. You do not notice it until it is not there. Records management is like a life preserver. You never think you will need it, but records management means never having to say you are sorry. This is a list of our staff. Tammy Marks, our director, myself, Rob Karen, who will do the second part of this training, and Bill Town, his assistant. Our website is listed here. It can be found through the State Archives webpage. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or any of our staff. Thank you for viewing this webinar. We hope you have found this information helpful in your pursuit of an efficient, ongoing records management program for your agency.